Yeah, we have started.
Good morning, our viewers. Welcome to the Council for Strategic Affairs monthly roundtable discussion. My name is Dr. Adityanji, and I am the President of Council for Strategic Affairs. Today is Sunday, August 11th, 2024. It is a few minutes after 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here in US, and it is 7:33 p.m. in India. Those of you who registered using our Eventbrite link probably saw this flyer. Military coup in Bangladesh, strategic implications, very important topic indeed. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. We encourage strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. CSA condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide. The Council aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. CSA promotes people-to-people contact and track through diplomacy. We have a monthly roundtable discussion, usually held on second Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. Sunday time. Today is not Saturday, Sunday. We had to make some changes because of scheduling conflicts. There's a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert, usually on fourth Saturday of each month at 10 a.m. EDT. There's a new feature, one-on-one interview called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanji. Council organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. We promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. There's a summer internship program for college students, a fellowship training program in strategic studies. I would request our audience to visit our website, www.councilforstrategicaffairs.org. Those of you who are based in US, we invite you to support and donate to us. The donation link is on the website. Let's move on to today's roundtable discussion. Military coup in Bangladesh, strategic implications. And we have a panel of distinguished professionals. And the first one is Ambassador Shashank, or Foreign Secretary Shashank. We have Brigadier Dr. Arun Sehgal, and we have Major General Dhruv Katoj. So let's start with the introduction. That's a picture for Foreign Secretary Shashank. He's a retired IFS officer. He holds a Master of Science in Physics. He joined the Indian Foreign Services in 1966. He had a number of diplomatic assignments. He was ambassador to South Korea, Indonesia, Denmark, and to top it off, he was appointed the Foreign Secretary to Government of India, the pinnacle of career in Indian Foreign Services, before being superannuated on 31st July 2004. Our second distinguished panelist is Brigadier Dr. Arun Sehgal. Brigadier Sehgal is a retired brigadier of the Indian Army and is Executive Director, Forum for Strategic Studies, a policy think tank focusing on national security policy and track to dialogue. Previously, he was the founding director of the Office of Net Assessments, Integrated Defense Staff, head of the Center of Strategic Studies and Simulations. He has been a member of Task Force on Net Assessment and Simulation under the NSC and consultant with the DRDO. He finished several books and monologues that have been published. He's a member of many Track 1.5 and Track 2 initiatives. I'm very proud to say that he's a member of our International Advisory Board of the Council for Strategic Affairs and a very, very respected mentor. He is perceived as the Dean of Indian Strategic Studies by everyone. And our third panelist is Major General Dhruv Katoch. General Katoch is an alumnus of Sherwood College in Nainital and also the National Defense Academy, Khadagwasla, National Defense College. He was commissioned into Dogra Regiment in 1972. In his distinguished career spanning over 4 decades, he has held instructional assignments in infantry school at Mao, the Indian Military Academy in Dehradun, and senior staff appointments at brigade, division, and corps levels. He has a vast experience in subconventional conflict, having taken part in IPKF operations in Sri Lanka, as also in operations against terrorists and insurgents in J&K and various states of the northeast of India. He writes extensively on defense and security related issues, also writes on non-military matters, both fiction and issues of societal concerns. He has been the director of the CLAWS, Center for Land Warfare Studies, and currently heads India Foundation, a think tank based in New Delhi, and he has been on our platform on several occasions. So our format is going to be that following my introduction, each panelist will make 5 minutes opening statement. This will be followed by 30 minutes of moderated discussion, and we'll have around 25 minutes of Q&A from audience, and then closing comments. So my request to all the panelists is that please do not take more than 5 minutes in your opening statement. So there are pertinent questions whenever there is an externally sponsored regime change operation. And some of these pertinent questions are: who sponsored the regime change? Were there more than one sponsors? Who are the beneficiaries of the regime change? Is there a threat to peace in the region? Who are the parties to the perceived threat to the stability? What is the strategic posture of the hegemon? Who is emerging as a victor and who is losing the balance of power? Before I start inviting the panelists, some housekeeping rules. Kindly keep yourself muted to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not try to interrupt our esteemed panelists. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to ask questions. No anonymous questioners, please. All the questions are moderated through the chat room. Please be precise in asking a question. Don't write a monologue or a lecture in the chat room. Finally, we are recording this program. It's being live streamed on our YouTube channel, and it will be available on our website. Again, please visit our website, www.councilforstrategicaffairs.org, and we invite our US-based audience members to donate, support Council for Strategic Affairs. We are a 501c3 organization. So without further ado, it's my honor and pleasure, distinct pleasure, to invite Foreign Secretary Shashank to make his opening statement on the situation in Bangladesh. Sir, welcome to our platform.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm grateful to you, Adityanji, to have included me in this distinguished panel. I hope to learn more by participating in the conference and roundtable today. My experience in dealing with Bangladesh was mostly at the level of the foreign secretary, or before that when we were trying to promote economic relations with our eastern neighbors, especially ASEAN countries, our Look East policy at that time, and BIMSTEC and SAARC cooperation. I must say that Well, there were a lot of elements of distrust even at that time, but we were able to persuade most of these countries. And I must share that I'm always very optimist in these regards, that during that period, we were able to interact with all the SAARC countries, set up a SAARC FTA, free trade area, in 2004. We were also able to set up a BIMSTEC free trade area by including all the BIMSTEC countries to agree to it. And we had set up uh, a strategic dialogue at the apex level with the ASEAN countries. And the ASEAN countries used to tell us that their dialogue partnership with India was one of the most valuable ones and which are most practical. So I think this was the situation at that time. Of course, in international relations, nothing is permanent, nothing is secured for all time to come. Now, what has happened in Bangladesh reminds me what had happened in Bengal in 1946, then later in 1971 or 70 at the time of cyclonic storms in that region. And later on, now we are finding once again. So, in all these factors, you have posed this question, who are the losers, who are the winners? I think the greatest losers have been the intellectuals, the young people, and the Hindus, and maybe some other minorities also, but mainly the Hindus, because in 1946 they were butchered mercilessly. Again in 1970, 71, they were butchered, and so much so that the United States at that time was carrying out its very important global strategic tie-up with China, and Pakistan was a willing partner and intermediary to that. So whatever genocide was going on in East Pakistan at that time and later on called Bangladesh was totally disregarded, and the Consul General Blood of the United States in Dhaka was called back, removed from service, and was banned from getting any further employment in the US government or any other state government. So much so now we have once again come to a stage where there is once again a change of government through what we call street protests, even after the democratic elections. So that calls into question what is the relevance of democratic elections? How do the democracies work? And what is the importance now of street protests, and who are going to lose? Are the Hindus going to lose initially, and ultimately everybody would lose? Perhaps South Asian region would become unstable. Chinese and the Americans, who are the major global players at this stage, are playing their own games with each other. And in the bargain, the countries in South Asia have to take the whatever comes to them. So I think this is some problem which we are facing. Uh, in India, we have a government which would like to improve relations with Bangladesh, irrespective of the government in power. And therefore, we find that India is being very quiet at the governmental level. They have not said very much about the um, massacres or assassinations of the Hindus, Hindu priests, the attacks on the Hindu temples, which are going on in Bangladesh. And I think surprisingly, the international community is also keeping relatively quiet on this matter. So I think they are the big losers. The democracy is another loser. That democratic elections have lost their relevance with regard to the performance of the countries, because of the street protests, which are very many times are backed up by social platforms, social media, and individuals, the NGOs, the rich people, like what they are saying in Bangladesh, George Soros, who had millions of dollars in order to bring about a change of government according to his own liking. And above all, it's China and America trying to play games in this region. So I think I would like to stop at that. Maybe I have done about 5 minutes or a little less than that, but I have laid the basic issues I have in my mind to share with your distinguished audience.
Thank you very much indeed, Foreign Secretary Shashank. With your role as Foreign Secretary, you probably have the best, domain expertise about the region in Indian subcontinent. Now it's my pleasure to invite Brigadier Dr. Arun Sehgal. He will give his perspective on this military coup in Bangladesh. Brigadier Sehgal, please. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Roxab. It's an honor and privilege to be on your show again. I will be focusing more on geostrategic aspects of this whole issue. We have had a coup there. We have had student agitation. Things are quietening down, but they are still in a very molten sort of a stage. Anything can happen. But the fundamental question is this, that this agitation started erupting, and there were very many reasons for this eruption. There was a period during this agitation when, after the High Court order, things should have quietened down. They did not quieten down. Number two is, who are the supporters? Who are the background guys who are supporting this color revolution? So this is an important issue, because until unless we come to an understanding of that, it is not the first time that has happened. This kind of issue has happened. Students have been agitating in 1990 when they threw out General Ashad's 8-year-old martial law oriented government. He was the president of the country. He was removed of power in a similar fashion. So in this case, large scale bloodletting, firing, and organized disruption. What is the cause of that? That's something which we need to be reflecting upon. The second issue which we need to also be concerned about is the fact is, and that also applies to the India, is while the economy is doing well, the people are poor. It is the trickle down effect of strong economy is not there. And one of the reasons which has not really come out is that the issue of pensions. The new pension law was being trying to be enacted, and where the people were supposed to deposit more money every month. And that is where the problem occurs. Similarly, workers who are responsible for the textile exports of this thing were not getting their due. So there was a widespread perception of looting and mismanagement of finances that was taking place. Now an issue which was becoming a boiling point. And third effect was that willy-nilly Sheikh Hasina had created an democratic rule, democratic autocracy in the country, and has stifled all opposition. Now this is again an important issue, and this is where a lot of other players have entered into the arena. So this brings me to my second point, and that is the role of other actors. We have to start looking at Bangladesh not as a neighbor. Bangladesh is a strategic space in Bay of Bengal. The strategic orientation of Bangladesh is getting escalated owing to the inroads being made by China, as also growing interest of the Americans. The sea lines of communications are becoming very important. The United States is very clear. In fact, there is a very interesting insight that this I have picked up, is that the Americans have said, he said, we understand that you have your own interests, you have your own perceptions about Bangladesh, you also have your own perceptions about how to deal with China. You want to be an important local regional player, but please try and understand that we also have our perceptions, and if we cannot cooperate in this space, then we will follow our own policy and own strategy to shape our space. And if in that bargain we have differences of views, and we cannot match up in our expectations with each other, so be it. Exact words are, so be it. And there is a very interesting editorial which has come out in Economic Times the other day, which has talked about, and the fact is that the Americans were telling us is, we told you so. And I've heard it with my own ears in conversation with some senior intelligence people in the United States whom we met in as late as 24th of November or June. They were very categoric that they say, we are looking at the situation not in Bangladesh alone, but we're looking at it in a composite whole, taking Myanmar into account, the developments in the Bay of Bengal, and also the Chinese inroads into the Indian Ocean region. So we need to take cognizance of these issues. India cannot just simply look at Bangladesh as a next door neighbor. So that brings me to China. Last visit of Sheikh Hasina was to China. She signed a lot of agreements, but there was disagreement and she came back. But the reality of the whole situation is that China is the biggest investor in Bangladesh. 21 bridges, 11 roads, large number of tunnels, a sea base in Cox's Bazar with 6 submarines base, large number of inventory which doesn't work, yet it is going on, $23 billion of trade, fast increasing debt burden on Bangladesh. So while the Chinese may be worried at this point in time, the word that I am getting is from Bangladesh is that the new establishment will not go against the Chinese. So there is a strong Chinese presence and Chinese realignment with Bangladesh. There was an exercise for the first time that happened in June this year. So the point which we have to understand is there is a jostling for power equations taking place over here between Myanmar, Bangladesh, and other neighbors of ours, including Sri Lanka, and the big power competition in the Indo-Pacific. The reality, unfortunately, is this is my personal view, some may not like it, is that India tends to look at our strategic neighborhood in very, very territorially bilateral terms. We do not try to look at it in the larger context. Mr. Shashank talked about the FTAs, etc. That was a great movement at that particular point in time. But simply question to ask you, sir, is what have they delivered? And how much have they delivered? So that's the issue that we need to be asking ourselves. So my third point is, what should be their strategy? I have 4-5 points simply. Multi-stakeholder engagement, all political parties, military leaders, and civil society. Support democratic forces and institutions in Bangladesh and promote stable democracy. Encourage cooperation through BBIN, BIMSTEC, and maybe it is time to start looking at SARC. Enhance security measures along the Bangladesh border to prevent any large-scale influx of refugees. And what are our red lines? Our red lines are actions that undermine our interests cannot be accepted. I repeat, actions that undermine India's interests cannot be accepted. Any strategic concession that undermine India's security is a red line. Let it be it the Cox's Bazar base, be it the St. Martin Island, be it any other thing. Bangladesh situation is not out of control, nor is theocracy in Bangladesh imminent. We need to constructively engage while showing and telling everybody that India interest cannot be undermined. India should deal with Bangladesh on the basis of strict reciprocity till we see signs of improvement and till we see that the government in Bangladesh, the democratic elected Bangladesh government, is ready to re-engage India on a terms that two good neighbors should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Sehgal. Now it's my pleasure and honor to invite Major General Dhruv Katoj, whom I have known since 2008-2009 when he was the director of the Clause and was editing the Clause website and would give me very helpful suggestions for my articles on his website. So Major General, you are the finalist. Please give your opening statement. Kindly unmute yourself, sir. You are muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Adityanji. I just would like to make a small correction. I'm not the head of India Foundation. I'm the director. The president is Dr. Ram Madhav. So with that having been said, um, a lot has already been said on the subject. I'll just confine myself to a few points, which is the way I look at the situation. Now, I think it is very alarming, not because these things don't happen or something, we keep having coups and et cetera, taking place all across the world. I think the difference now is this has become totally communal. And if anybody leaves out the Islamic aspect, perhaps you're not really understanding the problem which has taken place there. You see, in 1971, when the liberation took place, there was a bonhomie which continued for some time because Sheikh Mujib was there. But as soon as he was replaced, that entire aspect of what the two countries did together in fighting a war of liberation, it was a distinct, concerted attempt to bury it in the ground. And every time the military rule came in, it came in with the support of the BNP and the Jamaat-e-Islami, and this attempt continued. Now, within 15 years of Sheikh Hasina's rule, things started turning again. But what happens on the very first day of 5th August? The very first thing which happens is they take down the statue of Mujib. In a way, it signified the death knell of that cooperation which took place between the two countries. It was symbolic. And a memorial which they have built down to the freedom fighters, to the military of both the countries, that has been vandalized and destroyed. And immediately after that, we see the army, which was not taking part in the riots, they kept away very coolly, has now entered the fray on the side of the murderous assaulters who are killing the Hindu population. I think this army the Bangladesh army, and I'm making it very clearly, it has degenerated to an extent the way the Pakistan army had degenerated in 1971 in Operation Searchlight. I do not see any hope for this country because it has become a radicalized country and the power has been handed over to the mullahs. And the very first aspect of handing over that power is what has happened in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, where the Chief Justice was forced to resign and another person was put in his place. The students, please understand, are simply a front. They don't matter. It is the people who are behind the students, and behind the students is the Jamaat. They have got very, very strong organizational roots behind. They are controlling the way the winds are going to blow, and they will continue to do so till such time as this dispensation stands. Two things have happened, and I've spoken personally to people on the ground, very, very senior people. One, even up to now, there is no policeman on the ground. Whatever has to be done is being done by the army. The police has abandoned their post. That is one. And number two, as far as the Hindu community is concerned, it is being deliberately targeted. And I think this is a very disturbing trend. So let me look at the future. Some of the points which I think are going to be of which are going to be challenges for us. One, SARC. SARC was dead. It lies buried 100 feet below the ground now. It is not going to rise. Not that SARC was any great shakes earlier, but SARC is finished. With Pakistan out earlier and Bangladesh the way it is going, SARC is over. BIMSTEC is dying. Can we revive it? That is going to be the diplomatic and political challenge which we will face in the next few years. The three major challenges which I see, the immediate challenges, is how is India going to ensure the security of the minorities? Now, the new Prime Minister made a very brave statement. He says India should have done something when they saw their neighbor burning. Why did they keep quiet? Now, Bangladesh is burning now. Shall we intervene now? As per their Prime Minister. I don't think he would like any intervention of that nature. It is very nice to say interfere when you are not directly involved. But now he is the Prime Minister, and the first thing which he has done as the Prime Minister is he has abdicated his responsibility. The two major threats which I see, one is illegal immigration. They'll try to force an exodus of the Hindus. And then there is going to be a huge range of illegal immigration. A vast majority of Muslims are also like to come in. There are no great prospects in Bangladesh, despite the fact that in the 15 years of Sheikh Hasina's rule, the economy has improved 3.7 times. 3.7 times. That is the per capita income. And today their per capita income is 40% better than Pakistan's. And they started off being half of what Pakistan was in 91. All this has taken place in the last 15 years. So let us face it, regardless of the challenges which the Bangladesh economy faces, Sheikh Hasina did remarkably well. And yet she was thrown out. Because for them, I think now the economy doesn't matter. What matters is they want a theocratic Islamic state and they will die to the last Bangladeshi to get it. And that is a challenge which we will see as to how to face. Illegal immigration, the second challenge which I've said. The third, terrorism. Now, when Sheikh Hasina wasn't there, a whole range of terrorist camps had sprung up in Bangladesh, targeting India's northeast. The Indian insurgents were that side. She came in, she stopped it, he's returned to the northeast. What will happen now? Will they start again? I think this is the time when India has to make it very, very clear to the Bangladeshis, this is a red line. And if something like that happens, then there will be very, very serious consequences for the people of Bangladesh and for the government there, regardless of what the Americans think or the Chinese think or what anybody thinks. We are a player in our own right. There may be a geopolitical situation to it. The Americans may have their view. The Chinese may have their view. But I think they should not forget, we as Indians, we also have our view and we are here. The Americans are on a different continent. The Chinese are a little bit away. They are certainly not ocean. We will see what we can do to them. But this is our backyard. And I think the bigger powers must get it. And India must not allow them to forget it. This is our backyard. And any interference in our backyard, we will view seriously. Why should we view it seriously? Some of the immediate problems on the economic front, I think we've had a lot of cooperation going. That is going to stop at least for the immediate future. I can't see that going through. The transit corridors, etc., there's going to be challenges. The Teesta corridor, the Teesta, the water agreement. Well, for the moment, it'll be on the back burner. That all the transportation corridors, etc., that's out. The people-to-people contact. We had such a good thing going. The yearly, the Silet-Silchar get-togethers. It was a huge affair where people from both the get together. Once in Silchar, once in Sylhet. Goodbye. It's not going to happen. There is going to be tremendous challenges specifically because of the way they are going to treat the minorities. And this time, India is going to speak up. We have not spoken up since 1947. We will speak up now. I think the time has come to speak up, not just for India, but for the world too. And a clear message must be sent across to all across in the world and in India too, to all political parties. Thus far and no further, we will not take it anymore. That's all I have to say. Back to you, Dr. Sam.
Thank you very much indeed, Major General Dhruv Katoj. You indeed hit the nail on the head. That there are, besides geopolitical, geo-economic, I would say geo-civilizational issues involved here in terms of what is happening in this whole regime change process. So thank you very much indeed for bringing a different angle. Now from the opening statements, we go to the second phase of this roundtable discussion, of moderated discussion, in which I will serially ask a couple of questions to each of our panelists. So my first question is to Foreign Secretary Shashank. Ambassador Shashank, we did talk about who are the sponsors, and Brigadier Sehgal also alluded to his meetings with the State Departments in his recent visit in June of 2024 and their explicit answers. Sheikh Hasina herself had made a statement before being toppled that a white man from a big country came and requested a base at St. Martin's Island and expressed the desire to carve out a Christian country out of districts of Bangladesh as well as Myanmar, and assured that she will smoothly function as a prime minister for the fourth time if those wishes were acceded to. What is your response on that? Who is the sponsor here for this regime change operation?
Well, if what Sheikh Hasina said, uh, whatever she said, I think there is a big change in the American attitude ever since I retired from the service, because I remember receiving words of advice from the American side that they would be only too glad to uh, follow India's advice about its neighbors, excluding Pakistan. But they say any other neighbor in South Asia, they would very much like to go by India's advice. So if what Hasina is saying, and if India, as Brigadier Sehgal said, so be it. If India has a different viewpoint and if US has a different, so be it. So I think that seems to be a very, very big change in the American attitude towards India. So I think that is first thing which we have to understand, that what is going on. USA is not taking India into confidence in dealing with Bangladesh. And in fact, Sheikh Hasina made some reference even to some parts of India being included into a new plan, which is there for reconfiguration of the states in this region. So I think this has to be taken into account by the Indian side, by the Indian government. Simply, they have gone all out to promote bilateral ties with the USA, joining Quad and all kinds of exercises. Whereas we find that all the fault lines in India and South Asia are supposedly being utilized to undermine India's position and India's friends in the region. I will say that for the time being.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank. My second question goes to Brigadier Arun Sehgal. Brigadier Sehgal, again, taking it from there, it is stated that before the January 7th elections, there were two luminaries from a major power repeatedly visited Bangladesh. One of them was Victoria Nuland, and second was Donald Lu. Do you see the repeat of Maidan revolution in Ukraine in 2013 when a democratically elected president who was pro-Russia, Viktor Yanukovych, was toppled by street protests and mobocracy, and it is alleged that $5 billion was spent by an agency in Ukraine to topple the government. Do you see parallels with that?
Okay, the short answer is, like I mentioned, the Americans have their own game plan, their own perceptions of the region, and sadly, in some areas we are there is a congruence of interest. In some areas, there is no congruence of interest, and to that extent, if you recollect, even in G20. Prime Minister Modi, and when he met Sheikh Hasina, he had introduced her to Joe Biden. There's a picture of that, and the whole idea was that he was trying to explain the importance of Bangladesh to India, and we have categorically said to Americans very clearly the importance of Bangladesh to India. So that's an issue that we have conveyed, but their perceptions are based on the larger geopolitical competition with the Chinese and the Chinese inroads and the belief. And underwritten in all this, okay, I'm putting myself on the mat for saying what I'm going to say now. Is underwritten in all this is the American attempt to get from India a credible agreement or a credible acceptance that when push shove comes to shove in East Asia under various circumstances, India will be a core strategic partner. But in our discussions with the Americans, we unfortunately never get a reply or a categorical assurance that if push comes to shove in the Indian Ocean region, or there is a, because in my view, there's a lot happening in Indian Ocean region. This is not the place to talk about. But in the Indian Ocean region, or if our interests are involved, what is the role of God or the United States going to be in terms of our threat mitigation? So, despite the big aura of our strong relationship with the United States, in core strategic concerns, we have different perceptions. I have written about it in my papers. Our latest paper on India, Prime Minister visit to Russia, is worth reading, and not for because I've said so, because we try to outline different perspectives in that. And incidentally, I've sent a copy of that to Donald Lu also, whom I meet whenever I go to the United States. So it's not an issue that. So they have their own charter, and that's what I said. They have told us in no uncertain terms that we have our interests. We'd like to work together, but if we can't work together, we will pursue our own interests because they are our own interests. Like you will pursue your own interests. So bottom line, we should not have any illusions that United States will support us beyond a particular point in either credibility of democracy, credibility of democracy, or 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 in trying to assuage our interests in this particular region. We'll have to do it ourselves, like everywhere else. And like I said, we need to be more proactive ourselves and ensure that the Bay of Bengal region is India dominated, India controlled, and India specific region, and no outside players can play a role over here.
Thank you, Brigadier Sahil. My next question goes to Major General Dhruv Katoch. The interim chief advisor to interim government has been sworn in Bangladesh, who flew from Paris. And we all know many decades ago, an exiled leader flew from Paris to Tehran. And the interim government headed by Abul Hassan Bani Sadr was toppled immediately. This was a civilian government, interim government, that followed Raza Pahlavi's departure from Iran. And this leader who flew from Paris became the paramount religious leader, and we have all seen what has happened to Iran. Since you touched on the civilizational issues, do you see Muhammad Yunus as a reincarnation of Ayatollah Khomeini in Bangladesh? Go ahead, sir.
Right. There was some disturbance coming in, but it's okay now.
Sachi Dastidar, please unmute yourself.
Right.
Sachi Dastidar, please unmute yourself.
Right. Now, I don't think those two situations are similar, or what happened in Iran and what has happened here. You see, one, because Muhammad Yunus, he may be a Nobel laureate, etc., but he doesn't have that level of grassroots support. He's not a religious leader to incite the masses. So as far as his own personal standing is concerned, he is a propped up candidate. He's 83 years old, and the students have said, okay, we want him. And who has told the students to say that? There is that power. That is going to be the power behind the throne. The way I look at it is, it is going to be the Jamaat. It is not even the BNP. The Jamaat may not have adequate standing to win an election, but they have got adequate muscle power to see that everybody else keeps quiet. And I think it is the Jamaat which is going to call the shots from now on, unless something radically changes. And for a change, we actually see the army chief, getting behind the election process and says, okay, we are going to have elections in 3 years, in the next 3 to 6 months. But that's not going to happen because the student leaders themselves have said that we are looking at elections within a time period of 3 to 6 years, which means for 3 to 6 years, you are going to have a dispensation there, which is not going to be accountable to anybody, especially not to the people of Bangladesh. And I think that is a very dangerous situation. Like Iran, you are going to get a religious dispensation here. Unlike Iran, it is not going to be the Ayatollah. Whoever comes in will be part of the clergy, but it is not going to be on the pattern of the Ayatollah. It will be a part of the Jamaat, and they will call the shots. I think the United States may have won this victory. It's a Pyrrhic victory. They really didn't have to be too concerned with what China is doing there. China was really much more on an economic footing than on a geopolitical adventure here. It was the Americans who were on a geopolitical adventure. They wanted this St. Martin's Island so that they could train people whom they could send to Myanmar who could fight the junta. I mean, everybody has got all of them are playing their own small little games, but those games are not going to work. These are temporary small time players. And I think if you look at it over a 5 to 10 year period, I think neither the United States nor China has understood the impact of what religious fanaticism can do. And both are going to be burnt by it. The Americans have been burnt by it quite a few times. They were burnt in Afghanistan. They've been burnt in Iran. They've been burnt in Iraq. They still haven't understood it. The Chinese have never understood religion anyway. So to that extent, I think both of them are not understanding the fundamentals which are taking place in this society here. It is a radicalized society, much like Afghanistan and Pakistan, and appealing to it or working with it in the normal fashion is not going to work. So these challenges, I think, are going to remain. I won't really call it on the Iranian model of somebody being parachuted in and a new regime being formed. I don't see that sort of a regime. But I think this is the start of theocracy in Bangladesh, which was always there under the radar. And it will resurface again with much greater force and severity than hitherto. Dr. Saab.
Thank you, General Katoj. My next question goes to Ambassador Shashank. Ambassador Shashank, Brigadier Sehgal referred to Sheikh Hasina as democratic autocrat, whatever that term means, but it has been alleged that she was getting more and more dictatorial, had silenced all her opposition. Now, if I transport you back through the time machine into the history, 1998, Sheikh Hasina was the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. 1998 was the time when the 25 years bilateral treaty of friendship expired between Bangladesh and India, the treaty that was signed in 1973. Looking at hindsight, do you think it was a mistake strategically on part of Sheikh Hasina not to have renewed that bilateral treaty for 25 years or maybe 50 years? Now, let's look into hypothetical scenario that India and Bangladesh had a bilateral treaty of friendship and mutual assistance. Would we have seen what happened in last 4 weeks? Ambassador Shashank. Kindly unmute yourself, sir. You are muted. You're still muted. Yeah.
Now I've succeeded. Yeah, thank you very much for your question. What I remember is that Sheikh Hasina did not want to become autocratic. She wanted to take all the political dispensations in Bangladesh along with her. And that perhaps was the reason that she was being very cautious in her dealings with India, because she felt that if she got too close to India, as many of her predecessors had done who were not really from the Awami League, they found that they were treated as props set up by India. And whether it was small things like the masalas being sold in Bangladesh or any other thing, it was said that India was somehow trying to poison the Bangladeshis. So therefore, Sheikh Hasina was very, very cautious at that time. But if you recall that a few years ago, there were some public meetings addressed by Awami League leaders, including Sheikh Hasina, and attempts were made to kill her, directly to kill her. Initially, she thought that it was mainly meant for other leaders, but later on, she got the information from all kinds of sources that it was really to kill her. And I think that is the time when she changed. She realized that, like her father was killed, something similar, sinister was brewing inside Bangladesh. So there's no point in becoming so accommodative of all interests in Bangladesh and to fight with India and not to have a mutual assistance treaty with India. So I think now she wanted to set up as many agreements with India in the hope that India would become a important partner for Bangladesh's progress and would balance of China's role in Bangladesh. Of course, China has deep pockets, but India has offered itself in two ways as an attractive partner. Number one, that Bangladesh would set the priorities and India will give the money, support, and also other countries, other democratic countries like Japan and maybe even USA would come along with that partnership. Only thing is that Sheikh Hasina did not want to annoy the Chinese to the extent to sign Quad. She was not willing to join that. And I think from that point of view, the Americans, I think, lost interest in having any neutral relationship with her or support her and India's priorities in the South Asian region. And I think both suffered. India and Bangladesh kept signing treaty after treaty for transshipment, transit rights, for friendship among people, whereas people inside Bangladesh, they were being promoted by all kinds of people, whether Pakistanis or the Chinese or the Americans, to ensure that Sheikh Hasina goes out and India's interests are not looked after in that country. But what happens? India has two responsibilities, one to the minorities based on India's own parliamentary resolutions to help the minorities which are being persecuted in the neighboring countries, which once were part of India. Secondly, India in 1971 had gone for responsibility to protect the people in Bangladesh who are being coming under genocide and mass rapes. And we went to the UN. We did not get the UN General Assembly support, but we were able to mobilize the human rights organizations in the world to support India's position. And I think that is something which India will have to do in case we find that Bangladesh is now coming under a military rule. And we may have to tell even the Commonwealth and other countries, partners, that there is a basic principle that if democracy is in threat, then that country has to be kept in abeyance, its membership in abeyance in organizations like Commonwealth. So we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank. My next question will go to Brigadier Sehgal. Brigadier Sehgal, it appears that out of the multiple actors, whether it is China, whether it is Pakistan's ISI through Jamaat-e-Islami, or whether it is American agencies that have been involved in this regime change, it appears that the maximum role is played by United States and other two probably have convergent interests but not coordinated involvement. There are allegations about Muhammad Yunus's relationships with US-based agencies, political parties, former politicians, specifically Clinton's, his donations to Clinton Global Initiative, his donations to Clinton Foundation, and the fact that Clinton's lobbied with Norway for getting him Nobel Peace Prize. Is he a puppet of the deep state? What is your view on that?
Thank you for that excellent question. See, first, there is no doubt that he's been parachuted with the support of the people you just mentioned, United States, etc. Number two, please also note that the acting president of BNP is sitting in UK as we speak, and is operating from there. Some members of people who are involved in killing Sheikh Mujibur Rahman are also have been given asylum in United States, and they are sitting over there. So there is this whole angle of, and Muhammad Yunus is seen as a global figure, is seen as a person who was doing well for others through his Grameen Bank, in bringing about a revolution, the local revolution, and he was done down by Sheikh Hasina, and therefore he is obviously not pro-Awami League. What is his standing? So we have a 17 member, I think it's a 17 member interim government, which has also got a theologian as one of the members of this thing. There are, but this reasonably balanced organization. We'll have to just wait and watch and see how they proceed, how they go. Our big concern, as has been outlined, are that the violence against minorities must stop. There is some degree of law and order that must come back, and that the Bangladesh should start limping back to normalcy as soon as possible. And so this should be our immediate concern. As far as the other factors are concerned, they will continue to play their role. And here it is important for India to be very clear-headed how we want to handle situation. By saying this should not happen, that should not happen, this will happen, is of no consequence. We have to do a reach out. How do we reach out? Whom do we reach out? I mean, on an open this thing, I don't think it's a very fair one, but we should have. Uh, after all, when we did the ceasefire of 2021 with Pakistan, we had back channels, and the back channel worked. So we have to create those back channels. We have to find the right people in the back channel and ensure, and also categorically, I maintain it. I categorically convey India's concern and India's red lines. We need to be very clear on that. And my last point is, please remember, Bangladesh economic survival and its overall ties and cooperation with India are their lifeline. They cannot over a long period of time last on their own with having a bad relationship with India. That's something, but India should factor a period of 5 to 6 months where things would be abnormal, things will not be right, we might be hurt, we might feel angry, but we have to push it through and guide the direction that we want it through quiet diplomacy, reach out strategy, and back channel contacts.
Thank you, Brigadier Sehgal. My next question goes to Major General Dhruv Katoj. General Katoj, so far we have focused on geopolitical, geostrategic, geoeconomic issues. I'm going to ask you a question which actually pertains to domestic politics of India. And that is very, very important as to what happens in future. Very recently, on a TV channel, Republic, editor of a Bangladeshi news periodical, Blitz Live, Salahuddin Shoaib Chowdhury, made a statement that the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha from India had a meeting with Tariq Rahman, the working president of Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, and son of former Prime Minister Khalida Zia. Incidentally, Tariq Rahman is in exile because of prison sentence against him in Bangladesh. He is still not able to return back. But the allegation by this journalist from Bangladesh is that the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha in India gave a green signal to Tariq Rahman to start this mayhem in Bangladesh to topple Sheikh Hasina's regime. Your comments on that?
Now, there are two issues involved here. One is the meeting per se. I would go along with the Bangladeshi reporter. I saw that interview, which took place in Republic. I would go along with the reporter when he says that there was a meeting between the two. But I am very surprised as to how does he make an assessment as to what took place in that meeting unless it was advertised by either of the two parties. Because that meeting would have been held in confidence. So anything which happened in that meeting, the reporter would not be privy to. And if somebody was privy to it and has published it, then it would have made international news. So I'm very chary about the information per se, but I do feel that when Mr. Gandhi went there, he would have met Tariq Rahman. And to that extent, this has not been denied by the party concerned. But this is nothing new to the Congress. They've also had a meet. They've signed an agreement with the Chinese Communist Party, and I fail to understand how a political party can sign an agreement of that nature with a political party of a hostile country, and the contents of that are still kept secret from the people of India. So to that extent, the meeting has taken place. What was discussed, I really won't know. I do not think that Mr. Rahul Gandhi would have actually told those people go and carry out a genocide against the Hindus. That appears most unlikely. But whatever was discussed, I think it would behove a political party of that stature, which is our oldest political party, to at least be a bit more open about its dealings with certain elements, especially when India is in the present position where that particular party is hostile to Indian interest. For any leader, especially an opposition leader, to meet there, I think it should have been very, very clear. Even if they don't want to do it publicly, but I think privately they should go to the government and say that this is the meeting which took place and this is what has been discussed. In the absence of that, I think the suspicion will continue to linger as to what happened in that meeting.
Thank you, General Katoj. So we have come to the end of the moderated discussion. I move into our next phase, which is question and answers from the audience members. But before I do that, I'm going to invite a very distinguished guest and a member of our International Advisory Board, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, to give some of his comments based on this discussion. Ambassador Kapoor, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanji. It has been very, very interesting to hear the views of the distinguished panelists. My own understanding of the situation in Bangladesh is as follows. That the situation is very grave for the region and for India in particular. And my views are more in sync with the views of Major General Dhruv Katoj. But I would like to make a few comments as to why I say so. I think that the various forces which are working in the region and which succeeded in Bangladesh at this point of time were the following. One was, of course, the US, with elements like the State Department, which has already been discussed, and the evangelicals, which has not been discussed, who want freedom of religion, but freedom of religion for themselves also to go and convert the populations of these countries in a big way. Then the other element is the Islamist element, which also overlaps with the terrorist element. The third big element is the Chinese element, which is trying to carve out substates in those areas or zones of influence. And the fourth, of course, is the woke element. So if you have different, entities which have similar paths or overlapping paths or parallel paths of overthrow of the regime so that their zone of influence can be expanded, or not only that they can carve out a certain geography in that region out of Bangladesh. And I've been observing Myanmar very closely. And if that situation in Myanmar is not controlled and checked, soon it may break up into separate countries, different countries. So you have here a situation where all these forces are working with a lot of energy, money, resources, and focus to carve out a Christian state out of the southern part of Bangladesh near Chatgaon, where there are sizable number of Christians, out of Manipur, the Chin, the Kuki tribes, out of Myanmar, which have similar tribes which are Christian. Similarly, the Islamists want to carve out and expand their zone of influence. There has been tremendous amount of radicalization of Bangladesh, even under Sheikh Hasina, even though she may have tried to keep it under check to some extent, but has not succeeded. Then the Chinese also would want their own, sublets there or substates there, which they can control. So for India, what is the position of India today? India border has a very, very big border with Bangladesh, has a border with Myanmar. And all these forces are very active. The State Department also gave, I think, about $135 million for human rights work and study in India. The ambassador of US to India, Eric Garcetti, is calling for a conference of, on focus on human rights with all actors. We have been seeing the issues which are being brought up in India. Now in Bangladesh, the issue of reservations, which led to this entire, development happening of Sheikh Hasina being toppled and having to flee with peril to her life, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's statues being destroyed, museum being destroyed, traces of culture and traces of history being eliminated in Bangladesh absolutely by these terrorists. So the issue for India today is that if it does not understand the gravity of the situation, it is not very far off when similar things can happen on the streets in India, because the platforms are already there. You have the caste census being demanded by LOP and others in a very, I see the body language of the LOP in the parliament. It is very arrogant, very, very sort of self-confident, but very negative. Then you have the issue of bhagidari for on the basis of your numbers. And then you have the issue of the CAA. You have the issue of the NRC. You have the issue of the 370, Article 3. So all these are being again brought back into the mainstream discussion. And these are supported by Open Society Initiative of George Soros, for example. So you have the evangelicals, the George Soros type woke elements, the Chinese, the Islamists, all working together towards different goals ultimately, but following the same path. So how does India cope? Let me come next to how India can cope, or how India should cope with this very serious situation. First of all, I everybody here, if the strategists on this discussion, including Brigadier Arun Sehgal, does not sort of look at it so seriously as I would have expected him or anticipated him to look at it. I think it requires much more attention by all the strategic thinkers of India. India has to see, and vis-a-vis US, our discussions are not moving ahead in the pace at which they should have. We have to enter into a very serious discussion about partnership with the US, because US is also feeling that India's alignment with Russia on Ukraine and not taking on the cudgels against China in a strong manner on international fora is not to their liking. Now we have to be sensitive to US concerns. US has to be very sensitive to Indian concerns. And how do we enter into a partnership, a defense partnership with India, which is solid, where we are in a format like India, like NATO. Second is also India has to enter into a discussion with NATO. NATO has been asking for India plus NATO, like NATO plus 5. But it cannot be NATO plus 5 plus India or NATO plus 6. It has to be NATO plus India as a separate discussion. Similarly, India has to take this issue to the UN in a very, very positive, assertive, strong, affirmative manner to see how the international spotlight can be brought to the persecution of the minorities, including the Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, and Sikhs in Bangladesh. Not just the Hindus, but all the minorities. That has to be brought on to the forefront so that the whole international community wakes up and shakes up, and the US people get to know that India is taking some very serious steps. Similarly, it has to take it to the UN, not UN, to Commonwealth, as was mentioned by one of the panelists. So till India understands the gravity of the situation, through its think tanks and strategic thinkers, the day is not far off when similar actions can be initiated on the streets in India, because we have the Muslim population, which is in very large numbers. We have the others who are supporting Congress. We have the Hindus who are absolutely apathetic or supporting in a liberal way to the causes which I've just listed out. So there is already a critical mass available for people to come out to the streets and start the agitations. So how do you preempt that is what the government has to see. Whether the government has to, I think, talk openly to the people of India, say that the situation is very serious, very grave, and we are vulnerable. That has vulnerability has to come out openly, and the citizens of India have to be told that till they come out on the streets in very large numbers, particularly the Hindus, and start demanding that all these actions be implemented, all these steps be implemented, like the Waqf board, etc., in a very fast forward manner. For the government to go ahead and do anything will become less possible and less sort of, the path will not be as clear. So, how do you get the Indians out on the streets supporting and agitating for the right causes in very, very large numbers is one solution. I don't know of any other solution other than, taking it to international fora, having a greater partnership with the US, having NATO come into the region, etc. Thank you. Back to you, Dr.
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. I will go on to the question and answer from the audience. And the first question comes from Dr. Vineet Singh from Canada. And I will address this question to Ambassador Shashank. Ambassador Shashank, kindly unmute yourself. The question is, what would be the best way to deal with Sheikh Hasina in Delhi now, given the rumors of some Western nations refusing her political asylum? How does India balance such immense sensitivities? Ambassador Shashank.
Well, firstly, it's for Sheikh Hasina to decide what she wants to do, to go back to Bangladesh, to stay on in India, or to go to some other country where she has her relatives and all that for short period or little longer period. Point is that she came to the leadership of Bangladesh based on elections. So were those elections totally fake? Were those elections contrived in many ways? So that is something which should be seen over a period of time. So I think India will have to negotiate with those countries, those who are in power in Bangladesh, that they just cannot write off 40-50% of the people who had been supporting over the last 50 years the cultural identity of Bangladesh and a distinct better life for their people in cooperation with other democratic countries like India. So they just cannot go to a radical Islamist organization to give the leadership, or they cannot go to completely autocratic military rule in the country, supporting the religious dogmatic people. So therefore, I think these are things which have to be done directly by the Indians in Bangladesh, and see whether there is a possibility for Sheikh Hasina to go back. And if they go in for democracy, that she will have a proper space available to her to have her party achieve something, whether it is under the leadership of her son or someone else. Because there are a lot of people, intellectuals and young students and others, who have been supporting her party. So just because the street protests, one cannot say that they've all disappeared. I mean, it's like what Bangladesh would like right now under the present dispensation, to make all the 1 crore or more 1 crore Hindus disappear from Bangladesh for a moment. So that doesn't happen. Okay, this is what I would say, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador Shashank. Just for sake of Dr. Vineet Singh, Sheikh Hasina has already announced that she will be going back to Bangladesh as and when the interim government allows and holds quote unquote free and fair election. She has stated that her party, Awami League, will definitely contest any quote unquote free and fair elections that is organized by the interim government. She's calling their bluff. So she is no longer looking for asylum either in US or UK. Her stated intention now is that she will go back to Bangladesh as and when conditions are amenable for a free and fair elections. So after that, there are two questions in the chat room, and I'm going to skip them because those two questions have been, indirectly answered by our distinguished panelists as well as by Ambassador Kapoor. So the question by Ravi and Atul Kulkarni basically have been answered already, so I'm not going to repeat it. After that, there are two questions from, next two questions are from Vijay Nilekani and Dr. Shri Kant Chopra. And they are essentially the same questions. And I will actually direct these two questions to Brigadier Sehgal. And basically, both Dr. Vijay Nilekani and Dr. Shrikant Chopra are saying, does this represent the failure of India's intelligence agencies in predicting, preventing the predicament we are in?
Look, I mean, it's I don't. This whole thing is very complicated. It's not that we did not know. It is not we did not have pulse. Ambassador Sikri was the other day on the channel, and she categorically said we were in touch with everybody, and so we were in touch with anybody. Now it depends upon how did the political establishment in Bangladesh saw this whole situation coming. How did they saw whole scenario unfolding? Did they were they aware of it themselves or not? Is something which is still I mean, it is unfolding. I cannot say that, but yes, it is true that in our approach, we should have been broad. Approach should have been much more broad based. We should have been in touch with various political elements, political stakeholders in Bangladesh. We should have also been in touch with the elites in Bangladesh who would have told us what the scenario is panning out. And I go back to I was, well, not really this thing. I was doing a bit of an interlocutor role with the Nepalese MOIS during the negotiations with the government. Uh, so we when we used to discuss with them, we used to sound the government people. We used to sound this thing and come back and make copious notes and inform the government. I don't think there is anything to perceive that our intelligence or our political understanding was not there. It is never a question of information. It is always a question of interpretation and analysis. How do you analyze a particular piece of information? Was there any shortcoming in that? Time will tell. But the immediate concern is maybe we were a bit surprised by the pace of events, and the pace of events is an issue that and the second thing is we did not, I repeat, we did not fully comprehend what the other interlocutors and other interested parties who were trying to shape the narrative in Bangladesh were trying to do. We were a bit slow on that issue, because it's important to look inside to not to repeat mistakes. So I mean, I won't say it a mistake, but we need to enhance our understanding of this whole issue, because it's not that our NSA has been making a couple of visits to Bangladesh recently. He also went. So it's not that we did not know, but maybe the pace of events and our understanding of the other interlocutors was something which was less than adequate.
Brilliant, Brigadier Sehgal. I totally concur with your opinion. Next question. It's an interesting question and has already generated some discussion amongst our audience members, which is very interesting, and I'll address it to Major General Dhruv Katoj. The question originally was from Abhilasha Singh. Why are Indian celebrities, especially Bollywood and international cricketers, afraid to tweet in support of Bangladeshi Hindus and other minorities that have been persecuted in the last week. And this question has generated some responses, etc. But I would like your response to it, Major General Dhruv Katoch. Kindly unmute yourself, sir.
Well, this particular question will have multiple views. I mean, every individual will have his own take. But my take on this is, especially as far as the cricketers are concerned, they are very concerned about being what they call politically correct, and they carry it sometimes to the extreme. For Bollywood, no, there's a different take as far as Bollywood is concerned. Bollywood is controlled to a large extent because filmmaking is an expensive business, and a lot of money which flows in is black money. And a large part of that black money comes from what we popularly call the D gang, the Dawood Ibrahim and their setup. And if you notice that the films which have been made over, the change has taken place now, but earlier, every single film um, had a very soft angle to it for a particular ideological viewpoint. I won't go beyond that, but there was certainly an ideological viewpoint, and that was because the funding is coming from a particular source. And you found all the movies of the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000. The change started taking place sometime about 2010 or so, where the change started taking place, where the hold of the gang started reducing. But where they had the sway, where the money was coming from, people tended to speak that language, and they still tend to do so. So Bollywood is different. Cricketers, they tend to be politically correct, that okay, in India especially, that if you're critical of the Hindus, you are politically correct. You are secular. You do the same criticism of your Muslims who are the same citizens. Somehow that is not being viewed as politically correct, which means, in a sense, and I go about it to a much deeper way. Do these secular people not consider Muslims to be your citizens? Because if you consider everybody to be your citizens, then come on, everybody can be praised and everybody can be kicked equally. But when you try to mollycoddle some people, you really haven't accepted them as your own. And I think that is where the Indian cricketers and other Bollywood stars need to introspect a great deal. That's the way I look at it.
Thank you, Major General Dhruv Katoch. There are a couple of questions on US politics, etc. I'm not going to go into that. I will just respond by making a blanket statement. There were two people who have asked those questions. One is that we have seen there is some sort of ongoing systematic hostility of current US administration towards Sheikh Hasina government that was reflected in White House Summit on Democracy in June of 2023. In that White House Summit of Democracy, India was an invitee, Pakistan was an invitee, but Bangladesh was not invited to Summit of Democracy. Whereas at that point in time, Bangladesh was considered a model for moderate Muslim democracy. So that tells you that even as early as June of 2023, the current US administration had certain issues with Sheikh Hasina government. Another question is whether this will have any impact on US elections. No way. Elections are not won or lost on foreign policy issues. All politics is local, as former Speaker of US Congress Tip O'Neill said. All politics is local, so let's not go into US politics. We are coming to an end of this discussion. My heartfelt thanks to Ambassador Shashank, Brigadier Arun Saigal, and Major General Dhruv Katoch for an excellent panel discussion. My thanks are also due to our member of International Advisory Board, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. My thanks to all the audience members. More than 30 people joined in this discussion, and there are more, watching on the YouTube, taking 1.5 hours of your weekend time on this geostrategic discussion. Hats off to you, sirs and madams. Lastly, My thanks to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori, Mr. Rajiv Verma, and Mr. Ankush Bhandari. These are the people who helped me in the background making these kind of roundtable discussions feasible. Before I end, I will make another appeal to our US-based audience members. Please visit our website, www.councilforstrategicaffairs.org. As you know, we are a 501c3 organization. We are a tax-exempt organization for strategic studies. Kindly donate, support, so that we can have more of these programs. And lastly, a couple of editorial comments in my capacity as the president of CSA, as well as the moderator of this discussion. In an article in 2008 on a website called boloji.com, titled Engaging India, basically focusing on US-India relationship, I had propounded a doctrine called Adityan doctrine. And I had said that India as an emerging power will have to say it categorically that India manages its backyard. India manages its own near abroad without brooking any interference from the superpowers, be that may China, be that may United States, or for that matter, Russia. United States has a Monroe's Doctrine. Everyone knows what is that Monroe's Doctrine is. China is always asserting itself in its own periphery. Russia is making decisions its own near abroad. As a rising power, India has right to manage its own backyard or neighborhood or near abroad. So that is one issue. Second issue is R2P. R2P has been codified and memorialized by United Nations General Assembly. Responsibility to protect. Should conditions for minorities in Bangladesh go south? Should a massive genocide ensue? No government in India can remain silent. Let me be very clear. Indian government will have to intervene in that country, utilizing the doctrine of responsibility to protect. And with those editorial comments, I thank every one of you from the bottom of my heart, and we are ending this discussion. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.